Welcome once again to the church that Jesus built. My name is David, and today we'll be discussing the 12 steps that will help us to go from victim to victor. And they are powerlessness, seeking meaning, trusting, self-inventory, making amends, seeking forgiveness, forgiving, growing spiritually, letting loved ones back in, finding a new mission, trusting our new selves, loving and helping others. You will find the written portion obviously on the website. I'm hoping that the video will help bring these steps to life for you and help engrave their meaning into your minds and hearts and souls. I'd like to begin with a scripture, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. We fight not against enemies that are of flesh and blood, but against the evil rulers and the authorities of the unseen world, against the powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in heavenly places. You know, God says, my children perish for a lack of knowledge. If we're to become victors, first thing we need to do is understand our enemy. Who is our enemy? Often in life, we treat certain people as they are the enemy, and physically they may be. But the real enemy is the force beyond the force that we see. We cannot fight spiritual forces against us with physical weapons. We have to understand the spiritual warfare that we're in and use spiritual weapons against them. The enemy will send against us physical enemies. True enough. Excuse me. And against a physical enemy, you need to use physical weapons to overcome them. But we need to understand that we're in a spiritual war, good versus evil, God versus Satan. We need to be using spiritual weapons. In the process of going from victim to victor, one of the things that we have to do is to have the courage to really look in a mirror and find out what is the truth about us? What makes us tick? Who are we really? I have been exploring in caves. I have climbed on the Eiger. I have shot some pretty dangerous rapids. I've ridden motorcycles off cliffs, not intentionally, by the way. Done some crazy, dangerous things. Nothing more fearful, really, than to go down into the depths of your self-conscious and to find out who you really are. The truth is that I used to lead a lot of groups, and a lot of those groups were Vietnam veterans, and many of which were combat heroes, men who had charged into battle in the hail of bullets, and all around them mortars flying and hand grenades, just to save a combat buddy of theirs. Many wounded many times. But I would put a mirror in front of their face and ask them to have the courage to discover who they really were. And many were not able to have that kind of courage. Many died, continuing to be a victim. It takes courage to face yourself and find out the truth. So I'd like to begin by reading the opening to the 12 steps, which includes a prayer. The path from victim to victor is not for the faint of heart, but it is the only road that leading to home, to peace, to joy, to love, and a successful life. May God grant you the courage to fight for your life, for health, and for happiness. The strength to endure that long engagement with the enemy of within. The peace that comes from knowing that you are not alone in this battle, but by trusting in God and others, you will be able to surround your enemy and overwhelm them. The love which pours down from heaven and fills your soul to overflowing when you are able to forgive God, others, and yourself, and in the comforting knowledge that you will be living life to the fullest, not only for yourselves, but for your fallen comrades. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Now here it talks about fallen comrades. Again, these 12 steps were originally written for combat soldiers or combat Marines. But the truth is that anyone who passes in this life is a fallen comrade in the war, in the spiritual war. So through these 12 steps, hopefully we'll be able to take a look at the kinds of knowledge and weapons, spiritual weapons, that you will be able to apply to your life so that you can become a victor and stop being a victim. Now the 12 steps, basically the foundation of which, if you know anything about AA or been around the tables around somebody who has worked in an AA program, you'll find that there's a lot of similarities between the 12 steps of AA and these 12 steps. The truth is, as I said before, if you're an alcoholic or drug addict, those steps will work if you work them. A lot of people say, well, they don't work. Well, that's true if you don't work them. But if you do, they will work. All right, so step number 1, powerlessness. We accept the fact that we are powerless to change the traumatic event. It's important to come to understand that. Because what happens a lot of times, in most cases, is that when a traumatic event occurs, one stops growing spiritually at that point. And a lot of times emotionally and maybe even mentally. There's a struggle internally in the subconscious. It's like a car being stuck in a particular gear and can't get out of it. Or it's like those old, most of you may not even know what these are, but an album, a vinyl album that would get stuck because it'd have a spot on it where the needle would just repeat itself until you picked up the needle and put it on the other side. And one time I was at a flea market, I'm going, what are those things? I've never seen that before. Albums, never mind. All right, had to be there. Okay. All right, so we accept that we were powerless to prevent or becoming a victim of this tragedy. Now, in our minds, we probably could have done, we go over many things that could have been done differently. But we didn't do that because we didn't know that the tragic event would happen, did we? If we knew that there was going to be a tragic event, we probably would therefore do different things. But we're not able to see the future for particular reasons. And sometimes even if I believe, even if we knew, we still wouldn't be able to prevent certain things. Because certain things are just destiny for whatever reason. But nevertheless, we are powerless to change the events of what happened. We were powerless in to become that we became a victim. Okay? That as a direct result of this event, our lives have become unmanageable. We need to understand that it's not a an issue that we became a victim. But now that we became a victim, what do we do with that? Especially if we have the wisdom and the understanding and the tools and the weapons to overcome being a victim. It's one thing to become a victim, as I've said in the past, but it's another thing to stay a victim. We're allowed, God allows the trials and tests of life to come against us. That we might learn from them. That we might trust in Him. That we might rely on Him. That we might seek Him. There's a movie which I love. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's called Love Comes Softly. And the main fellow in it is talking to this his wife, who he married in a very strange situation. She was an unbeliever at the time they got married, which I don't recommend, by the way. Anyway, so she's just trying to discover why God would allow bad things to happen to good people. And the way he described it, I think, is an excellent way. He was saying it'd be like a father with his daughter walking next to him. He can't prevent certain things from happening to her, but he is always there through every trial and every test, there to pick us up and there to carry us, there to dust us off, and there to help heal us in that process. It's not about this life. This is a schoolhouse for eternity. This life doesn't last very long. And as you saw, if you saw in the last video, the comparison of this life, no matter how long you live compared to eternity, is just a millisecond. Compared to trillions of years, no matter how long you lived, even if it was 969 like Methuselah, is just a millisecond. This is a schoolhouse for learning. Some of those lessons are very hard, very difficult. But it is just an instant compared to eternity. The important things is, what do we learn? That we stay in a right relationship with God, that we get in a right relationship and stay in a right relationship with God, that we begin to realize that we're powerless in this life. We're like a leaf, as a human being, we're like a leaf blowing in the wind. We're powerless. Yesterday it was 86 degrees here in New England. Today it's 50. Powerless. You know? Have you ever seen what wind damage can do? I was in the military back in 1991 when Hurricane Andrew destroyed South Dade, Florida, southern Miami. Unbelievable. Airplanes turned upside down, trains turned upside down, turned overthrown, whatever. Complete villages absolutely destroyed. Steel girders tied into pretzels. The power of the wind. We get into a false sense of security because God has given us just enough intelligence to get ourselves into trouble and think that, especially when we're young, we feel invincible. We're going to live forever and that we can accomplish great and wonderful things, and many times He allows us this too. But it's not even our power to accomplish those things. In and of ourselves, we are completely powerless. Now that ought to terrify us. It should, to a certain degree. But then when we realize that we're not alone in this battle, and that it's not our battle in the first place. Moses was standing up against the Red Sea when Pharaoh's armies began to charge at them with something like 14,000 chariots, armed with the mightiest army at that time, and the children of Israel completely unarmed against this physical warrior force said, stand still and see the glory of the Lord. It's not our battle, really. It's not. It's God's battle. When we trust in Him, we become very powerful. Who's on our side is the issue. Who's standing on your side versus who's standing on the other side. There is going to be a great war at the end. I've read the end of the book. I know how it comes out. There is going to be a great Armageddon. And the evil forces will lose. I suggest now that you get on the right side of the spiritual war so that you too will win in the end. We freely admit that we have not been able on our own to correct the damage done to ourselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as a result of the traumatic event. We are unable to correct the damage that's been done to us in our subconscious. We're not able to change that on our own. It's with the help and understanding of God that unlocks the door, be able to reprogram. It's through God's knowledge and grace that He gives us the power and the understanding and the ability to do it. Because on our own, we're like a blind man in a room trying to find the doorknob. It's only through God's help and understanding of all this process are we going to be able to undo the damage. It's sort of like when a butterfly or a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Once it happens, it doesn't go back, except God could make it go back or whatever. But once something happens, it's changed, except God's help to unchange it, to make it better, to make it, it's actually, it's interesting how, when something, or like, for example, China, fine china doesn't become fine china by itself. It has to go through a fire, an intense heat, a tense test, and then it becomes fine china. So the things that we've said before is that the things that Satan has meant for evil, God can actually turn that around for good, for great things. Not just good, but great things. We have come to an awakening that we can, with God's help, as we understand Him, and with the help of others whom we trust and possess the collective power to move from being victim to victor. So once again, is that once we understand this whole power issue thing, that is a key weapon in our arsenal against the spiritual forces of evil. The Bible tells us that we ought not to fear who can kill the body, but fear him who can kill the body and the soul and send him to hell. Satan, believe it or not, does not have the power to send you to hell. He can certainly work on it, and he does his best. Trust me, Satan never sleeps. Okay? While you're sleeping, 8 hours or 10 hours a day, whatever it is that you get to sleep, he's not sleeping. He's working on your destruction. It's pretty scary, huh? The good news is that he's only limited in his power. God is the most powerful. God created all things and has the power over Satan. Okay? Satan is not more powerful than God. Okay? God says, if God is for you, then who can be against you? So, remember, who has the power to save your soul is obviously the most powerful. So if God is on your side, you may just be one and God, but if you're teamed up with God, you're the majority. You can surround and overwhelm the enemy and cause him to flee. Scripture tells us that if we resist Satan, he will flee from us. Yeah, I remember having a dream. It was some of my dreams are beyond dreams. You probably have some of those that were actually real, you know, in a sense. And Satan came to steal my soul. And I began to curse him in the name of Jesus. And he fled from me. I was terrified in my flesh. Spiritually, I was I knew I was armed with the proper spiritual weapons to cause him to retreat, and he did. All right, so step number 2 is seeking meaning. So what we have to do in order to see the sunshine again after the storm is to begin to seek meaning. And what now? We have come to a realization that we have survived for a reason. The God of our understanding has a mission and a purpose for us still in being here alive. We have come to accept the responsibility that where there were 2 lives, and now there is but one, ours, to live life to the fullest, not only for our sakes, but for the sake of our fallen comrades in arms. This step is to assist specifically those with a survivor's guilt. You may be a parent, one of your children has passed away. You may be a spouse, or your wife or husband has passed away. You may be a child and one of your parents has passed away. You may be a combat soldier and one of your comrades in arms have passed away. The point is to realize that you have survived for a purpose. One of my best friends, who is now passed on, was a Marine in Vietnam, and he was in a infantry company of about 235 Marines, I believe it was, and there was less than a handful, maybe 4, 5, or 6, I mean, I don't know how many. It was not very many survived one of the attacks from the Vietnamese, and he was one of them. And he struggled with survivor's guilt until he found meaning in his life. And he became an alcoholic, and then he began to help people recover from alcoholism. There's a reason why some people survive and some people pass on. AA says that some people have to die in order for other people to live. We can find meaning in life after the tragic event if we look, if we want to find it. One of the things that I ask people to do is to conceive of what that person who's passed away would say to that person if they could. If they could speak directly to them, what would that person say? Would the person who's passed away say, "Oh yes, be miserable. I want you to stay miserable for me. I don't want you to find meaning. I don't want you to be happy. I want you to, eventually take your own life through drugs, alcohol, sex, dangerous activities, whatever." Yeah, no, right? I mean, what real loved one would say that? Sometimes what you can do is you can actually write a letter to yourself as if you were the person who passed away. What would they say to you? And see it and read it. It's important to allow yourself to open the door to finding meaning in this new life. What were the lessons that needed to be learned? And what can you do with them? Just realize that where 2 or more lives were, now maybe there is only one. So you represent that life that you have, represents more than just you. You're living for more than just you. You're living for a person who cannot live anymore. cannot see or feel or love or touch, at least in this world. Now, hopefully most of those people have gone on to heaven, but many of them probably haven't. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn the lessons that maybe they didn't learn and live for them. Don't let their lives, or rather their deaths, be meaningless. Trusting is step number 3. We are willing to seek the God of our understanding and his help in the time of trouble, that he might lead, guide, and support and love us upon the road to becoming a victor. We have become willing to put our trust in at least one other person who is willing to be my comrade in arms against the internal battle of my mind, emotions, and spirit, and where the real battle is being waged. We realize that we, with the help of God and at least one other person, we have overwhelmed and surrounded the enemy, and it is impossible rather, not to be victorious if we work the steps with complete commitment, and as no half measures will avail us anything. So there's several different things that's involved in this step. One is trusting in God. Well, what if you're angry at God? I have been extremely angry at God. I have, at one point in my life, especially when I was young, I was looking for ways to survive extremely abusive upbringing that I had to suffer through. And I connected myself very strongly with the Native Americans. At one point, spiritually, I felt like I was a lot more Native American, although I do have some Native American in me, the Hopi tribe. But I felt more Native American than I did as a Caucasian, which was difficult and strange as it was. But at one point I was, because one of the things that the Indians did, which I felt was helpful for me, was that they caused their own bodies physical pain in a variety of different ways, so that when they were healing from the physical pain, it was symbolic that they would be healing from the emotional, spiritual pain as well. So one of the things that I had done was, as a 10-year-old actually, I made my own loincloth, and I ran barefoot around a cinder track, which was not easy. You know, if you've ever run barefoot at all, and then run barefoot on a cinder track, it was, anyway. And during that process, I had a vision, and the voices of the millions of Native Americans who had perished and had been slaughtered by my race, if you will, the Caucasian race, was crying out to me. And I could feel their pain. And I could feel their frustration and their anger and their questioning of God. So I became very angry at God over that. I began to question him and wonder why it was that he would cause a race that was so in love with him. Now, they didn't understand Christianity only because they had never been taught it. In most cases, they had been taught Christianity, they accepted Christianity. It's unfortunate that Christianity had been used for the most part as a weapon against them, to tame them so that they could be conquered. Not in every case, of course, but in a lot of cases. At any rate, I began to struggle and was very angry at God. And at some point, I read the story of Job. And I just began to trust in God because God was sovereign. If you know the story of Job, if you haven't read, please read it. At least read the first 3 or 4 chapters, and then you can do yourself a favor and skip most of the middle, and you won't miss much. And then go, at least in my opinion, and then go to the last 3 chapters. But poor Job had everything. He had wealth, and he had a bunch of children, and he had all kinds of, animals of all kinds, and just God had blessed him mightily. And it's scriptures say that he walked with God. He was righteous. The scriptures didn't say that much about anybody, So Job was an excellent man who loved God. And Satan came before the throne of God, and God said to Satan, "Where have you been?" He said, "To and fro, and on the earth, and looking to whom I might devour." And God said, "Well, have you considered my son Job?" And the devil said, "Oh, okay, let me try it. See what's going on there. See what I can do." God said, "You can touch anything in his life, but you can't touch him." And so on the same day, a messenger came and said that all his animals had been killed or taken from him. All his children that were at a party, one of his children's houses had collapsed and so forth, and he'd lost all his children. Then God comes and says, "Well, you can actually touch him, but you can't kill him." And so Satan covers him with boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. Open sores, pus. Can't even imagine. But Job said, "Though you may slay me, I will trust in you." Now, obviously, at some point after all of this, and he doesn't even have the support of his wife. His wife says, "Why don't you curse God and die?" And his friends are basically trying to get him to confess to sins he never committed. And I guess they were friends. Anyway, so in the end, Job basically says, "I wish I had never been born. Cursed is the day that I entered the world, and I wish I'd never been born." So in the end, God tells Job to stand up and defend yourself like a man, for I, God, will, confront you. So God goes into this whole dissertation, if you will, on how he created the universe. And do you understand any of this? How I hung the stars in the sky and how I tilted the earth on its axis, exactly how it needs to be so that we would neither freeze nor burn up. How the oxygen gets made, how I stop the seas and allow them to go this far and no further, and so forth and so on. And after he's explaining, I mean, think about what kind of intelligence it takes to make even a bird who has no arms make a nest with her beak for her little birds, or little babies, that they might stay in a nest despite all kinds of storms. It can do it without even I couldn't do it. I couldn't weave that stuff around there to make a nest to hold just the slightest little things. How do you create mountains? How do you make a body, that an eyeball to see, a brain to think? We can't understand any cotton picking thing really, except God allows us to understand a little bit. We can't even understand the concept of who God is really, except that he's love. But God, can we really comprehend? No. Just because we can't understand it doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Anyway, so I began to just trust in God. I can't understand God. I can't judge God. I can't know what is best to do and what is not best to do. I can only trust that God has a plan and he's in sovereign power over everything. So I began to forgive God and trust in his sovereignty. Okay, we also have to begin to, so not only do we, we jumped ahead a little bit in talking about forgiveness, but we also have to begin to trust God for his plan. And we need at least one other human being on the planet that we can trust through this process. Okay? There's Moses and Aaron. There wasn't just one. There was Joshua and Caleb there. Jesus sent out the disciples 2 by 2. There's a reason for that. We need at least another human being that we can trust in to go through this journey with us. There is somebody out there. You can take that to the bank. There's somebody that you can trust. You may not think so. It's because you haven't opened up your eyes and your mind and your heart or looked. But there is a person you can trust to become your combat buddy, if you will, through this spiritual battle. The other thing that I want to emphasize is the fact that no half measures will avail you anything. Satan is not coming at you with half measures. You can take that to the bank too. He's coming at you full force with all of his arsenals. You defend in half measures, it ain't going to work. We have to be totally committed to ourselves and to this battle and to the knowledge and understanding that will free us from being a victim. Step number 4 is a self-inventory. We have become willing to take a fierce moral inventory of ourselves, to seek the truth about ourselves no matter where it might lead us, or how difficult the battle engagement might become. We have become willing to accept responsibility for ourselves, for that which we have said and done, and for all that we have not said and not done. As mighty and courageous warriors, we shall descend into the caverns of our hidden mind and root out the truth. We shall take command of our subconscious minds and reprogram it according to a new standard of operational codes. And we will set in motion to move from victimization to living a victorious life. It's important that we take a look at the events of our lives and to figure out what responsibilities that we have for what we've done. There's a lot more than we probably ever want to realize or accept. And taking responsibility for that, man, was going to lead us into the next step, which is making amends. But before you can begin to make amends, you need to know and understand what you need to make amends for. In every divorce, it's 2 people. If we haven't been part of the solution, then we've been part of the problem. Oftentimes, the reason why the person maybe we married was a witch, whatever, on wheels, if you want to say that, is maybe because, number 1, we chose incorrectly. Number 2 is that because of who we were, we brought out the worst in them rather than the best in them. So we need to understand what responsibility we have and what's happened to us in our life's history and take responsibility for it. And with that information, we can begin to make amends. But what I suggest is you begin to journal your life. By learning what it is that you need to take responsibility for. This whole process is actually a way for you to really get to know who you really are. As we talked about in the post-traumatic introduction videos, is that the real you is hidden in the subconscious. It's like the truth, the important part of you is hidden in a cavern well below the surface. As you make your way down to free that person and to bring them out so that who you really are can now begin to blossom and to grow and to take charge, hopefully in that process, you'll learn how to be a friend to yourself. You cannot be a great friend to someone else if you're not a good friend to yourself. You know, in this self-inventory process, I began to realize that I had to accept both my strengths and my weaknesses. That God made me exactly as imperfect as I am. He made me perfectly imperfect. God caused defects intentionally in me and each one of us for a purpose. We are not going to be perfect. Can't be. There's only one perfect human being who also happened to be the Son of God. But he was fully human and fully God. And as a human, he was perfect. But none of the rest of us can be. So I know for some of us who strive to be perfect, and I had a perfectionist for a father. So my goal in my whole life was to be perfect. And I could not accept any part of me that was not perfect. And there's a lot of that, so there's a lot of unacceptance. But through this journey of becoming your own friend, you have to be thankful for your strengths and for your weaknesses. God never intended for us to live life alone. So it's sort of like if we find the perfect match, they will be what we're not. And they'll fill the gaps, our gaps, and we'll fill theirs. Sometimes, some of them obviously will overlap, and that's great. But the point is that if we find someone to walk down this path with us, to fight our battles with us, they will hopefully complement our weaknesses and we'll complement theirs. But to become a friend to yourself, I suggest that you start doing a journal. I do my journal, and while I also am writing it for my own benefit, but I also actually, it's open communication. It's a prayer journal to the Lord. So anyway, so get to know yourself, get to love yourself, and accept yourself for all your strengths and weaknesses. Because you're a complete composite of all the good things and the bad things, all the good experiences and the bad experiences. In order for you to grow, you've got to love yourself where you're at. For example, I said this to a lot of people who suffer from overeating issues and that sort of thing. A lot of people will say, "Well, I'll love myself if I'm 50 pounds less. I can't love myself until." If that's the case, you're never going to get 50 pounds less, and stay that way anyway. You got to love yourself where you're at, and then choose to love yourself 1 pound, also 1 pound less. But if you don't love yourself where you're at, love who you are, you're not going to be happy then either. Trust me. I'll be happy if I'm, I like myself. I love life if I'm, rich or whatever. It's not there and then. It's not things that is going to make you happy. It's what's going on in here. It's, do you love yourself, who you are spiritually? And obviously, if you are reborn, you have the Spirit of God in you, then you will also love the Spirit of God who lives in you. it's interesting because the truth of the matter is that would we invite Jesus into a dirty home? If we knew he was coming, would we not pick up, not clean up, not tidy up, not freshen up, none of that stuff? Most of us wouldn't, right? Well, Jesus is living inside of us now. Why wouldn't we clean up, tidy up, straighten up our spirits? Why wouldn't we want to figure out what's wrong and try to make it right? So again, we can't fix what's wrong unless we know what's wrong. So this whole aspect of self-inventory is extremely important, and it takes a ton of courage to actually do a fearless moral inventory. Okay, so with that, we begin to figure out what kind of amends that we need to make. We have become willing through the process of our fierce moral inventory to make amends to those who we have harmed. If except to do so would to cause them greater harm. So it's important that we understand that sometimes people have moved on with their lives, and to enter ourselves back into their lives might cause more harm. And so sometimes the amends that we need to make would be of a spiritual nature. Begin to pray for those people that we have created as victims. Because all victims, almost all victims, I would say 99.9% of victims have created other victims. So if at the very least we could begin to pray for them, we begin to work out our inventories, our amends rather, with them in a spiritual sense. But in many cases, the people that we've affected may still be alive and be appropriate to actually do amends. We have come to the knowledge that the first person that we must make amends to is ourselves. We must apologize to ourselves for not awakening sooner, or not seeking God through this process, or not getting the proper assistance or whatever. That we can make amends to ourselves and begin to understand that we ourselves deserve a better future than we have allowed in our past. Okay? Again, we cannot, in most cases, I truly don't believe that we can prevent becoming a victim, but we can work with God's help and the help of others to no longer be a victim. So one of the persons that we have to make amends to is ourselves. So immediately we will stop trying to kill ourselves with drugs and alcohol. Okay, that'd be the first thing. Okay, so if you are abusing drugs and alcohol as a result of, of anything, regardless of whatever it is, be good to yourself. The point is to begin to be good to yourself. Don't you deserve, ask yourself this question, don't I deserve a life of peace, of joy, of happiness? Every one of us has the opportunity to find peace, love, and joy. Every one of us. And I don't care how difficult it might be. As I pointed out in the last session about the man Nick, who's born without arms and legs, has found happiness, love, and joy and peace in his life. And if he can do it, the rest of us can do it. A fellow I talked about, the burn victim, found it, and he set himself on fire, trying to destroy his life. Regardless of where we're at, we can and deserve to find peace, love, and joy. Only Satan is trying to keep you from acknowledging and understanding that you deserve peace, love, and joy. He's going to tell you 50 ways from Sunday why you are horrible, you shouldn't ever God is never going to forgive you. How can you forgive yourself? How could you can forgive those who perpetrated, the traumatic events against you, whatever? But trust me, you are a child of the Most High God, and you deserve peace, love, and joy. God loves you. And if God loves you, why do you think you have the power? You should not love yourselves if the God of heaven loves you. Okay? So it's amazing how we think we're smarter than God. God who knows everything doesn't need a computer, doesn't Google anything. God knows more than Google, believe it or not. He loves you for who you are, for all the good and bad, willing to forgive you. Then you be willing to forgive yourself, be your own friend, make amends to yourselves, start treating yourself well, start giving yourself the life that you deserve by seeking peace, seeking love, seeking joy, even again as the process begins to forgive yourself and treat yourself well. Okay, and endangering our lives through high-risk activities such as, sometimes, like I said before, people are involved in things such as, it's like seeking death. It's activities that are just absolutely dangerous. How they drive or ride a motorcycle or whatever. Some of the activities that, I know people enjoy jumping out of planes for a variety of reasons. Not me, but anyway. But examine at least the motivations for those kind of activities, and that you're not seeking death, as a way of stopping the pain, stopping the punishment of yourself, and some kind of righteous judgment against yourself, so to speak. We shall treat ourselves and others with the utmost respect due another child of God. So the biggest thing in making amends is make amends where you can. Begin to make spiritual amends where it would be more harmful, or you can't find the person, or they're passed away. The process would probably, in most places, be good if you wrote letters, even if the person has passed away. Write a letter to them, asking them, for their forgiveness, as well as, saying you're sorry, taking responsibility for whatever you did, that sort of thing. But the important thing is to begin to no longer make the same mistakes. Stop creating victims, okay? As much as humanly possible, obviously. The biggest thing is stop doing the wrong things and start practicing the good things in that process. Okay, I think we're going to, we're already at 53 minutes now. So we're going to take a break on this video, and we'll return with and begin with step number 6.